Picture this, a sacred relic born from divine instruction, carved from acacia wood, lined with gold, and said to hold the very voice of God, lost for millennia, or maybe just hidden. Not in the sands of the Middle East, not beneath the hills of Jerusalem, but across the waters, guarded, moved, protected by a secretive order bound by blood and belief. The Knights Templar. Tonight we step further into the shadowed corridors of one of history's most captivating mysteries, the journey of the Ark of the Covenant. We've walked through its biblical origins. We've entertained the theory that it rests deep within the hills of Ethiopia. But what if the Ark didn't stop there? What if it made its way to Europe, riding under the crimson cross of the Templars? We ask the question few dare to. Did the Knights Templar take possession of the Ark of the Covenant? And if so, where did they take it? This is Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
I'm Shane Skwarek. With me, as always, my brother in belief and bullshit, Mr. Philipps. So pour yourself something strong, ladies and gentlemen, because we're here and we're about to get medieval with it. How do you like that one, Mr. Philipps?
I love it. I love it. Belief and
I
bullshit.
really tried to mix you up a little. I saw your face in that one. I liked the reaction. For once, I wasn't getting distracted by you. Actually, I was courting that reason a little
Well,
bit.
it's because we're live, so I wasn't doing any goofy shit before we started recording.
Everyone can see you out there now, right? So this is one. Well, for those tuning in for the first time here, this is the third in what we're hoping are going to be really 4 episodes that we're going to do on the Ark of the Covenant. And it sort of happened that way because this is a topic that has been widely requested, whether it's on our social channels, through emails, whatnot, which is something you can do too. If you click that like or subscribe button right now, send your requests and we're happy to take a listen to them and see if we can schedule an episode. But it's been widely requested. And Mr. Philipps, it's been one of the ones that you've wanted to actually discuss for quite some time.
Dude, I love anything surrounding the Knights Templar. Like, I've been fascinated with them for years. It's a secret society. It's lost, potentially buried treasure. Like, what's not to get excited about? I think I had alluded to in one of the first Ark episodes that we did. By the way, I like installments. This is our 3rd installment of the Ark series.
Okay.
Yeah, baby.
All
Let's
right.
get classy
I can take
with
installments.
Let's get classy with it.
That is
But I think
very
I alluded
classy.
to earlier. Yeah, I know. That the Templar story is to me the most fascinating part of the whole Ark story. So
Sure.
I'm pumped for this one, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And within the first 2 installments, if you haven't checked those out yet, I mean, we started with really just the origins of the story, where it came from, what it's supposed to be, both, on paper and both from sort of the mythology that's built around it. And obviously that kind of spins off quite a bit, depending on where you look. With the second episode, we took it to Ethiopia and, without kind of spoiling the entire episode, we went through just the whole crutch of that conspiracy, that it is still there today, and the belief system that has been built in Ethiopia that really stemmed from this, I don't want to say rumor, that's probably the wrong term to use, but this story, this, without using the word
Theory.
mythology again, this theory, right? This theory that it was there, and really what's happened to the people of Ethiopia because of that, how it's changed their lives. The next natural progression in our story is the Knights Templar. And like Mr. Philipps alluded to before, that there's a lot of conspiracy around the Knights Templar. They're tied into a lot of different things here. We're not going to tackle all of that tonight. I think we're going to probably do several other episodes on the Knights Templar in the near future.
Well, you bet your ass we will.
We bet your ass we will. But for tonight, we're going to focus the Knights Templar as it pertains to the Ark of the Covenant, and we're going to see where this takes us. So Let's start with a little bit of background, I think, on the Knights Templar. Since these are your babies, I'm going to give you the floor on that, and hopefully you've got your notes in front of you, unless you're pulling it out of the old
Aw.
noggin there, which I never
Why,
know.
thank
Cheers,
you,
by the way.
buddy.
Cheers
Thank
officially.
you, buddy. Cheers.
We're not allowed to
Cilantro.
actually promote what's in here because
No,
it
we
might
can't.
limit us, but
But you can take
you
a
guys
guess.
get the idea of what it is.
It's a sea tail.
Yeah, it's a sea tail. We can say the word. I mean, I guess it's the name of the show, right? So cheers.
Yeah, I guess. We would think we should be able to say that, right? Although YouTube says no.
Yeah.
In any event, my friend, the Knights Templar, let's dig in. So the Knights Templar, they're a medieval, and if you love medieval stuff, and that's kind of another reason why I love the Knights Templar so much. Like, to me, like, I think back to, like, Robin Hood. Like, remember the Robin Hood movies, like Robin Hood Men in
Love 'em.
Tight, or what was that, the one where they were animals? The Disney version. Like, I loved that as a kid, right?
I mean,
Loved
Men in
that.
Tights was more of like a comedy, like a spoof, right?
But I
yeah,
love
I
that
get your
time
idea.
period in history. So for me, the Knights Templar
Sure.
are like, boom, it's just so fucking cool. So they're a medieval Christian military order that were founded in the early 12th century. They were based on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Key to this story, my friend. Their location, now the Temple Mount, for those who don't know, was built on top of the original Solomon's Temple. All right, when the Israelites first went to Israel, Solomon built the very first temple there, was destroyed more than once. Fast forward to medieval times, literally, not figuratively. Have you ever been to medieval times, by the way? I've always wanted to go.
I've not. I know that is something we should actually do. Not gonna lie.
We should bring the kids to that. That would be fun. I don't know if
That
they
would be a
have
lot of
medieval
fun.
times around the country. If
Like
anybody's
New Jersey.
listening around the country or around the world and you don't have a medieval times, we have a really cool one here in New Jersey. You go, you eat with your hands, they put on a show, you have some sea tails, and you have a grand old time. So anyway, fast forward to medieval times, the Knights Templars formed. It was quite literally so. I want you to think of the Knights Templar as an army for the Catholic Church. That's essentially what they are. They went on crusades. They were literally the protectors of. It was like the Vatican's army. They didn't answer to any king around the entire world. They answered to the Pope and only the Pope. Now, in our next installment, we'll talk about how that kind of gets a little turned upside down and how that actually kind of goes downhill for them. But they were essentially the army for the Vatican. Now, what's super mysterious about the Knights Templar is the fact that in a very, very short period of time, they amassed a great amount of wealth. And where could that wealth have possibly come from, Shane? What are your thoughts on that? Any ideas?
Well, that's a good question. I wanted to backtrack on something you just said. They became one of the most powerful organizations in Europe, backed by the Pope, granted their own territory and exempt from taxes. And without diving into too much, it sounds like a certain town in New Jersey sometimes, or a certain.
That it does, my friend.
Yeah. Nevertheless, you're right. They amassed an incredible amount of wealth, and I think that's probably where their notoriety stems from. This strength, this wealth. They build a massive network of castles, and they actually become Europe's very first international banking system.
Yes, they did.
So how do a group of monks go from protecting, dusty trails and guiding Christians from our Christian pilgrims on their journey to Jerusalem to becoming these guardians of ancient relics, Mr. Phillips? And that's where I assume that wealth comes from, is this, I don't know, I guess the discovery maybe of relics along the way. Like if your goal here or your purpose here is to quite literally be chaperones for these Christian pilgrims moving to Jerusalem, my inclination is you're spending a lot of time on the road. You're checking out perhaps ruins of ancient cities. You're scouring the area within the journey from point A to point B, right? Because you got to make sure it's secure. It's not like you're just like kind of galloping along the side of them. You probably scouted the area first, and perhaps they come across buried treasures. Perhaps they come across just kind of abandoned cities and towns and villages, and they just maybe start gathering small wealth from that. And maybe along the way they start to find things. Don't know. I mean, do you have an answer to that, or were you kind of hypothesizing?
That in and of itself, we could probably do a whole episode just about the Knights Templar and where they got their wealth from. That in and of itself is a conspiracy. And so there's no historical documentation necessarily stating that the Knights Templar found or even attempted to find any sort of any sort of treasure or religious artifacts or things of that nature. But how can I possibly phrase this in the most simplest terms? the amount of wealth that they amassed in such a short period of time was staggering, so much so that you talked about it earlier. They were actually the kind of the first order of a banking system in Europe, right? And so, granted, right, we're talking about a very powerful group of people, a very powerful sect of people, right? As anybody knows that studied that time period, we talked about earlier, they were essentially the armed forces of the Vatican. The Pope really ran everything, right? I mean, every country had their kings, their queens. If it was a Christian country, those kings and queens, they answered to the Pope, right? They really actually ran everything. So yes, they had the backing of the most powerful I mean, you could really kind of look at the Vatican as a nation at that point in time. They really had the backing of the most powerful nation, if you will, known to mankind at that point in time. Having said that, they were also many thousands of miles away and amassed a great amount of wealth. And so the conspiracy is, what did they find while they were setting up shop on top of Temple Mount?
So that's a great segue.
Better yet, what did they find underneath Temple Mount?
Ah, look at that. That's like a great spot for like a commercial, which by the way, we're happy to take on your sponsorships right here, Here we go. Commercial cue. That's like your cue out there to send us some sponsorship. In any case, formed in what, 1119 AD, by 1120 to 1130, the Templars are based in Temple Mount, which of course is believed to be the site of King Solomon's original temple. There is, I don't know if these are theories or if these have been kind of proved through ancient text. Maybe you know a little bit more, that the group conducts secret excavations beneath the Temple Mount, supposedly over that decade from 1120 to 1130 AD.
Yeah.
So when you start to take that into context with what you said, historians are now arguing that they're searching for lost biblical relics, which certainly lends credence to the whole theory. And then, we'll end up talking about the Vatican later, but there's some credence there. Others tend to believe that they already had a map of knowledge of what might have laid belief. And as we just said, like maybe that's something you could have found along the way within your journey right there.
So an interesting note real quick about that period of time, right? So as I mentioned earlier, they were the armed forces of the Vatican, essentially. There was a 9-year stretch in which they were not involved in any type of conflicts at all, right? They were not out crusading. They were essentially, there was kind of quote unquote their peacetime, if you will. So it's theorized that during that 9 years, they focused on excavations of the original Solomon's temple, and that is when they found everything that was buried there prior.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, actually. And I mean, I guess the question at that point becomes, the crutch of the story lies in the fact, is Solomon's temple, which again, it ties into where the ark was, the last known location, if you're ignoring the Ethiopia
According to the Bible.
According to the Bible. If you're ignoring the Ethiopia episode from last week, the last known location is King Solomon's temple. In 1867, a British engineer named Charles Warren conducts his own digs under Temple Mount and does find tunnels and chambers that align with this legend. So for the sake of our discussion, we're going to assume that this is the location, right? For the sake of this story. If you don't believe that, if you don't believe Temple Mount is King Solomon's temple, well, I mean, then the whole theory kind of goes kibosh for you, unless you just think that there was tunnels there for no other reason. Fast forward a little bit, Philipps. 2014, there's actually a paper that comes out too, Biblical Archaeology Review, and it does reference a lot of the oral traditions that the Templars recovered something of immense spiritual value. So I pose the question to you then, or maybe to our audience out there. Is it now coincidence that shortly after the Templars returned, they suddenly gain all this power and this influence beyond anything that they've seen before, or do they now possess a sacred object capable of bestowing such fortunes?
Yeah, look, I think either way, it's good for the Templars, right? So regardless of what they found, if they did excavate under the original Solomon's temple and they did gain access to those tunnels that were under there, and we know 100% today that there are tunnels under Solomon's temple that actually lead out to what would have been outside of the perimeter of the city of Jerusalem at that point in time. It was essentially an escape route, and the reason why the story is, well, I think about it this way, right? If you have the most important artifact known to mankind, okay, along with countless, I mean, we're talking about, I mean, literally millions, I shouldn't say millions, but thousands of pounds of silver and polished gold and just treasures that you can't even imagine, and you're going to hide them there, you're going to want to plan an escape route in the event, right, that you need to get it out of there. And so, regardless of what they found under there, whether it's the Ark or not, it's a good situation for the Templars if they did excavate it, right? So, whether they just happen to find all of that polished gold and silver, or they found the Ark, they're in tip-top shape. I, for the sake of fun, because I love this story, want to believe that it was the Ark. It's also theorized, and we're not really touching on this, that the Holy Grail was found there as well.
Ooh, see, that's another fun episode we can end up spinning off into. So another one right
Do you
down.
ever go to take a sip and your straw just literally just goes away from you? Like it's not even anywhere
Yes, all the time, which is why I just hate using straws. So I actually just use straws as like a stir, and I just grab it, I kind of peel it off to the side. Unfortunately, Sangria doesn't warrant a straw tonight. I'm just kind of sipping it and enjoy it.
I thought that was some hibiscus tea.
Nah, no, it should be. I like the hibiscus tea too. It's a great one.
I love the hibiscus tea.
Good for the blood pressure for everyone out there. See, this is an educational program too.
It is.
We're not just here, sipping and BSing.
Sipping and flipping.
So we talked about the escape route. By the 1200s, the Templars now have significant holdings in southern France, particularly in that, like, I don't even know how to say that word, Mr. Phillips. Languedoc. I'm not French. I killed that.
I have no idea.
Home to the Cathars, a Gnostic Christian group, obviously, that has their own secrets here. I know that you don't think the Ark landed in France, but do you have any background on what brought the Templars there, maybe what happened when they were there?
What do you mean, when they were in France?
Yes.
Well, dude, I mean, the Templars were, France was a stronghold for the Templars. I don't believe that the Ark was never in France. I think that there's a good possibility that at some point it actually was in France. I don't know if it stayed in France. And we'll get to this a little bit later, and this kind of ties into our next episode once we talk about the Vatican. I think it potentially went somewhere else, but I think that there's a possibility because France was such a Templar stronghold. I think it was there for a short period of time before it was quote unquote smuggled out and hid somewhere else, somewhere north.
Okay, somewhere north. Do you know where Temple Mount is in relation to France? Like, can you describe that, I guess, for the audience? Or are you going to pull up a Google map?
I can. They're not close by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at
one's
a map
in the Middle East, right? The other one's in Europe.
Right. So like when we're talking about like moving through the continent of Europe, right? Like you're not talking about like a quick walk. You're talking about Temple Mount, which is like, it's obviously in Israel, and you're crossing over the Mediterranean Sea here. You're heading all the way over to France. I'm actually just going to pull up a quick screen share here, which we haven't really done in a while. So
no, we haven't. I was going to attempt to do that, but I know you're much better at that, so I'd left you to that.
Yeah, I guess I'll do the screen share here. Temple Mount, Google Maps, you should see it here now. All right, so Temple Mount, we're all the way down over here. I got a full globe going on here. So we're in Israel. So when we're talking about the Ark moving now, we're moving from Israel. We've already talked about it going down to Ethiopia, which is obviously a little further south, right down here. So for the sake of this conversation, what we're saying is you're going over the Mediterranean Sea right here. I don't know how that is, if you're going up through Turkey, Bulgaria, or if you're just literally taking a boat across, which I guess is presumable.
Right. It's also important to note that my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is important to note that the Templars actually had their own fleet of ships, right? So these are not,
in all likelihood, they're moving through the sea right here, right?
Correct. This isn't some little militia. We're talking about one of the greatest, kind of armies at that point in time that the world knew.
And your home base becomes in Italy because Vatican City, right? And again, we'll get into the Vatican and some theories on that later. But now we're landing ourselves in France right over here. So the Ark at this point, if we're subscribing to this theory that it's on the move, it's already kind of passed through Italy and it's now landed in France. Quite a stretch, especially at that particular time, I think, from where you'd assume that it initially began. Going from there, and these French names are going to absolutely bury me here, so I hope we have no French speakers here, but Rennes-le-Château is a small French village. It really became... Was that good? Would you take that?
It sounded good.
We've got Andrew on YouTube.
Don't do it again.
I'm not going to say it
go
again.
with the original.
We've got Andrew commenting on YouTube on a live stream here. Said he told you to drink that quick. Your paper straw is going to disintegrate. But I don't know if you're a French major. Then maybe you can give us some hints and how good or bad we butchered that. But it's a small French village, becomes infamous now in the 1800s when this local priest discovered some mysterious parchments that hinted at buried treasure and secret bloodlines. So there's certainly something going on in that area at that particular time. In all likelihood, though, like if the Templars are on the move, let's say they have possession of this ark, I don't know that, especially at that period where they've got this insane strength and wealth, I don't know that they're just letting this thing sit in one particular place. Like, I'm inclined to believe that it's on the move with maybe their inner circle of who might be, I guess, running the show, right?
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
and see, here's part of the story too, and this is kind of where we get a little bit crossed up with the whole Vatican part, is it's important to note that at some point in time, the Templars come under great scrutiny of King Philip of France at the time. And I'm not going to dig too deep into that story right now. So, somebody might be going, well, hey, if we're talking about an incredibly powerful, sect of Christian warriors, like, what do they have to worry about? Well, it wasn't always fine and dandy for them. They did come to an end eventually in 1307, I believe it was. And it was around that point in time where it's believed that they would have moved the Ark. Why? Because they felt the walls closing in on them, and they said, hey, this is the most important artifact known to mankind. We've got to hide this thing. So I just kind of want to bring that to light for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, again, that's a really good pivot to going back to the Cathars, right? They're a Christian dualist sect that's flourishing in southern France. So why does that matter, right? They're rejecting Catholic sacraments, hierarchy, materialism, and they're embracing more of a pure aesthetic life. So this makes them kind of heretics in the eyes of Rome. Own clergy, own sacred texts, possibly own esoteric knowledge passed down outside of the Vatican's control. Again, why does this kind of make sense with the Templars? Well, because they're heretics from the church, there's always this lingering threat that, some sort of an engagement could potentially break out here. So they're setting themselves up as a stronghold in southern France, right? They're surrounded by Templar settlements and activity. And there's a lot of theories that they might have shared some secrets with the Templars, and the Templars were effectively serving in a secret alliance to protect them. And potentially that's where maybe some of these treasures or secrets were hid. So the Grail and the Ark both kind of get intermingled here when we're in France. Some scholars are suggesting that the Holy Grail, like you alluded to before, was most associated with the Cathars and that group. And that may have been a code for something else like the Ark of the Covenant. So they start to be used interchangeably in here.
Right.
During the siege of Montségur, 200 Cathars were burned alive by the Inquisition. So their entire settlement is now burnt to the ground. It's destroyed in this war. And according to that legend, 4 Cathars escaped down the mountain with a mysterious treasure the night before the massacre, obviously believing that that treasure is gold. So I guess that again leaves the lingering question, Mr. Philipps. Were the Cathars guarding secret knowledge? Were they guarding the Ark? It's worth mentioning that, and we brought this up in the previous episodes as well, when you fast forward into the 40s, right? Adolf was very much into the occult and searching for technologies and treasures. Like, that became his shtick. And I'm heavily convinced it's hardcore behind the motivation of, this domination, right? And that's, again, it's probably a topic we'll never be able to discuss on YouTube because it'll get immediately banned. You can't talk about anything.
You said the A name. I don't know if we're allowed to say that.
I know. Well, I'm always reluctant to say all the rest of it there. But you talk about their group and how they searched that region in France during World War II for those lost relics of power. So are they getting the same information from us? Were they privy to other information? Don't know. But I always find it interesting to find where they did search, because the legend obviously held enough weight, even in the 40s now, to suggest that it could be there, or at least at one point, maybe there's some sort of a map or some remnants of something there. Again, the same thing that happens at Temple Mount happens in France here. There's ancient Templar tunnels that are discovered, sealed vaults, encoded symbols throughout that whole Languedoc region, suggesting that this hidden network does exist.
You know what's fascinating about we'll call him A, going to search those areas of France? We talk all the time we talked about it, certainly about the pyramids, we talked about the ice wall, right? If one billionaire out there was interested in these things, they could make that happen in a heartbeat. They could walk into Cairo City right now and go to the official and say, hey, I'm giving you whatever you want. Let me in, baby. I want to take a look inside, right? Well, if you think back to the 30s and the 40s, Nazi Germany was the most powerful nation in Europe, right? Our boy A here, I don't want to call him our boy. He ain't our boy, trust me.
Certainly not our boy. That's
certainly
more just
not our
like
boy.
lingo. Yeah.
Exactly.
It rolls off the tongue sometimes.
Had the power to do whatever he wanted, right? I mean, he could literally, quite literally dominated France. So if he was interested in these things, whether he actually thought the Ark was there or not, maybe it was just a fun expedition for him to send some of his boys on to go take a look. Hey, go see what you could find, right? I've read up on this book, and this medium, he was big into the supernatural. This medium told me that something was there. Go take a look, search for it for me, right? Why not?
And if you look at all the places that he had went, right, eliminating all of the other, superstitions and mythology that he was chasing down as well. But if you look at all the places that he was trying to bring his army to, whether it's France or Italy, I mean, they all tie into exactly the path, the mythology of the Ark, right? So I don't know. It's fascinating. I wonder why there's not that one of the first things I think I would do if I was a billionaire was try to seek out one of these ancient stories and try to pay off some government to let me excavate there or wherever it might be. If I was really set on something, maybe people have tried and we just don't know, or maybe those governments know something and they just don't want to let them know, or maybe they just don't know to allow people to get in there and ruin the mystique because it'll ruin their tourism. But nevertheless, the Ark's last home in the Templar story is not France. It brings us in an escape to Scotland. And I guess that's your King Philip story, is it not?
It is, right? And so, again, this kind of ties into what we're going to talk about next. But so what had happened, my friend, was that, as we talked about earlier, the Templars, and this is where it gets a little confusing, right? Because I said that they answered only to the Pope, right? However, King Philip of France at that point in time was deeply, deeply in debt to who? The Templars, okay? So what happens when you are a king of a nation and you are in deep debt to somebody and you just decide you don't want to fucking pay that debt? What do? King Philip over here decides that he wants to take them down. But how can he do that? Because at that point in time, most Christian nations in Europe, who did they actually answer to? The kings and queens. They answered to the Pope. So you're quite literally going to the Pope and saying, hey, Pope, I don't want to pay your army, essentially. I don't want to pay you. I'm pissed off. And, oh, by the way, I want to murder all of them. How are you going to get that done, right? You don't. So you go behind the Pope's back. Moral of that story, but where that ties in, right? You might go, but if the Pope is the most powerful person on the face of the planet at that point in time, how does he allow King Philip to do this? Well, King Philip was fierce. He was an absolutely fierce leader. He thought absolutely nothing of, murdering you and sticking your head in a pike, murdering children. I mean, he was an absolutely brutal ruler. He, at that point in time, not King Philip, but Pope Clement, I believe I'm saying his name correctly. If not, sorry guys, we're going to call him Pope Clement. He was French. And it's theorized that he was actually under the thumb of the reign. And at this point in time, he was not living in the Vatican, right? So Pope Clement wasn't living in Vatican. He was staying in France, and it's theorized that he was under the thumb of King Philip at that point in time. So, although this kind of gets a little bit messy, right? Because everybody really should be answering to the Pope. It's kind of theorized that the Pope was a little afraid of King Philip because he was such a brutal, had such a brutal reign of terror. So he goes behind the Pope's back, which he was not happy about, but he really couldn't do anything about it because he was afraid for his life. And what does he decide to do? He decides to persecute the Templars. Now, we mentioned Roslyn Chapel. Where does that come into play?
Hold on Roslyn Chapel.
Shoot.
King Philip of France orders this mass arrests, mass persecution of the Templars. The best piece that I found out of this is, do you know what date that fell on?
When? I know it was in October.
Friday the 13th.
Oh, look at that.
And that is where the the legend of Friday the 13th kind of being linked to like horror and betrayal comes from. It's from that. It's
Is
from
it really,
from
dude? I didn't
the
know that.
yet from the ordering of the mass arrest of the Templars by King Philip IV. Little cool little fact right there for you, right?
I like that. I
As
like that
as
little
a
tidbit.
horror fan, though, it's very aligned to our
Yeah.
podcast. We're
Well,
both into
listen,
horror.
had that not, thank you, Templars and King Philip, because had that not happened, we would not have an entire movie franchise.
That's true. That's true. So you talk about Roslyn Chapel, built in the mid 1400s by William Sinclair, and obviously it's got a lot of connections to the Templars, filled with esoteric carvings. Take it from there, Mr. Phillips, because this is a story you know offhand, and I'm just kind of reading off notes, and you're just rattling off. What's the significance now of Roslyn Chapel? We have this fallout with King Philip. We have this fallout between him and the Templars.
So Scotland and
matter to
Roslyn
us?
Chapel are key because at that point in time, Scotland was not under the rule of the Pope. Okay, it was one of the only nations in Europe that was not under the rule of the Pope. So where else did the Templars have to go? Now, to your point, most of them on Friday the 13th, they were ordered to be detained, if you will, say it lightly. But those who did escape, they went to Scotland. And so Roslyn Chapel's built. Now, granted, Roslyn Chapel was built a little bit later, and if you look at the math, it was actually built about 150 years later, so the timeline gets kind of a little wonky there, and this is where it starts to mix the Templars and the Freemasons. And for those who aren't familiar with the Freemasons, they're believed to be kind of a sect of the Templars after Friday the 13th of 1307. I believe it was October. I'm not sure if that's 100% correct.
That'd be impressive if that's correct.
So somebody in the comments let us know. But in any event, it's believed that they fled to Scotland, brought the Ark with them. Now, granted, they would have had to, if that's the case, they would have had to hid the Ark somewhere else, right? Because I just mentioned that Roslyn Chapel wasn't built to about 100 to 115 years. Somebody do the math on that. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. About 100 and 150 years after they were exiled out of France. But if you look at Roslyn Chapel, it is gorgeous. In fact, I don't know if you have the opportunity to pull up some photos of the carvings. I mean, it is absolutely magnificent. Absolutely just decadent in Masonic and Templar signatures isn't the right word, but iconography, if you will, pointing to the fact that the Ark might actually be hidden in Roslyn Chapel.
I'm going to pull up some images for you right now. I completely butchered the spelling of Roslyn Chapel, but
I think it's Roslyn.
Yeah, it's two S's in there, apparently. Let me pull that up right here, Roslyn Chapel, and we can see some of the pictures right here. I'll pull up the bigger image right here.
So that right there, go back to that one if you can.
Yep.
All right. So that is what's called the apprentice pillar. You see that pillar right there, right in the middle? So obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but Roslyn Chapel is filled with pillars, right? As one would imagine if you've ever been into a chapel or a cathedral before, there's pillars all over the place. That is the only pillar inside of Roslyn Chapel that is so ornate like that. It actually has a very unique backstory. It's believed that it was actually built by, and it's called the apprentice pillar because it's believed to have been carved by an apprentice. And when I don't know what you would call the mason, like the chief mason, if you will. But when that person, that we'll call him the chief mason, returned, he was so he flew into a fit of rage because he couldn't believe that his apprentice had built this beautiful sculpture and actually killed him right there on the spot.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, imagine that.
There's a better picture for you. That's pretty intense.
So
damn.
Yeah, so the story goes that the Ark is actually hidden underneath, directly where that apprentice pillar is. And that's why it's adorned in such a way that it is. This signified that the Ark is actually underneath it.
Right.
So we know that, and again, let's backtrack a little bit. You have to stick with the story and understand that the Templars eventually became the Freemasons, and the Freemasons were the ones that actually built Roslyn Chapel. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's adorned in Masonic iconography from everything from what they call the Green Man, which was actually a pagan symbol of that represented, you know, man and nature. It actually kind of looks like a face made out of leaves and vines coming out of the mouth, to things like squares and levels all over the place. Actually, on one archway there is maize, or better known as corn, which is super interesting because how did they know about maize? Because maize is grown where? Here in the United States, or at that point in time, the new land,
Well,
which they
so
would not
yeah,
have traveled to.
so we'll get into that in a second. I want to pause you on that one. I want to kind of go back to that gap too, right? You talked about that time period, 1307 to like 1400s, give or take. 1446 is what I also have here. Theorizing here a little bit, right? If we know that the Templars had this network of tunnels, I mean, we know the power, we know the wealth that they had at that point. They have this network of tunnels already set up in France. They've got vaults everywhere. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could have been moving the Ark within there. During their exile, my inclination is that this wasn't sudden, right? This is obviously pent up frustration coming over a period of time. And for a group of people, any group of people, you can find parallels to today too. You're going to have the wherewithal to realize that, you know, I think our time here is probably ticking and we need to kind of make our next decision. Where are we going to go?
Right.
Scotland isn't chosen just out of random because they're in a fight with the Pope and they're discommunicated. That's not the right word. Excommunicated from, the Pope's control. It's chosen because they've already had relationships there. There's people that they can trust there. And I think this is just pure speculation. Before Friday the 13th happens and all of this chaos goes down in France, my inclination is that there's already some sort of a vault system set up in Scotland, and this Ark is already on the move. We saw this in France itself, right, with the Cathar group. The Templars have no problem making friends on both sides with the enemies, right? And sharing secrets back and forth. They've kind of got their hands in every pot. They're always playing the middle. And so, when they see one relationship sort of souring, they lean in on that other relationship. At least that's from the perspective of what I've seen so far. And so I wonder if they didn't always have some sort of a connection to Scotland. Roslyn, I think that was, if we want to follow this theory, right? I think that was intentfully built to house the Ark as now a new stronghold, but it doesn't mean that it was brought there after it was built.
Right.
It means that maybe it was already there. Maybe the vault underneath was there. Maybe there's a network of tunnels. And when you say that they built the pillar on top of it, it's because they already have it in position, in place right here. It was always meant to house it.
Right. That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
There's also some speculation about William Sinclair and his family that I was reading into, and I didn't deep dive too much into it because, again, this is kind of scratching the surface for me. But as you say that, it kind of strikes that chord again, that maybe he is a person that warrants a little more research, because he comes from sort of a generational secret keeper family. Like, his parents and his grandparents and all generations before him sort of had this interconnected. They always sort of held information and served as this like transient between these I don't want to call them elitist groups, but maybe more secret society types.
Right.
So if you have a relationship with him, maybe he's already got the resources to house whatever you're housing, and maybe he just doesn't ask questions, right?
Or
So
maybe
do you think at that
maybe he's filled
ahead.
in, right? I mean, if you have
Well, right.
right, exactly.
He might already be aware of what's coming, and he's using his resources now to get this going. Now, again, there's a 115-year gap here, right? Or give or take, 100-year gap, whatever it is. If you're looking at that and then you see William, when he builds this thing, what's not to say that his father wasn't involved and his grandfather wasn't involved and his great-grandfather wasn't involved already, and that's why he becomes sort of the bearer of Roslyn Chapel, or the architect
because
of this.
it was
this
completed
plan.
at his right.
That is
during
the
his lifetime.
generational
Sure.
secret keepers, because his lineage has now had their relationships with the Templars. So we're in Roslyn Temple, or Roslyn Chapel. I keep interchanging the words temple and chapel here.
Yeah, they mean the same thing.
We're in Roslyn Chapel, Mr. Phillips. There's carvings all over the place. We just saw the pillar you're talking about. Tree of Life's in there. There are symbols of the Ark within the chapel, the cherubim, some sacred geometry. Like you said, there's depictions of maize and aloe plants, suggesting the knowledge of Americas way before Columbus. and some of these secret voyages that could have been the Ark, could have been involved. This isn't one I wanted to dive into too much today because I honestly didn't know that it had much tie to it until you brought the maze aspects of it. But there's some speculation that the Ark could have landed on Oak Island, and there was that TV show, was it The Secrets of Oak Island or something? The Treasure of Oak Island, Curse of Oak Island.
Still on today,
I don't
baby.
know. You were a fan of that show,
Dude, I love that
right?
show. I love
Did
that show.
they ever tackle the Ark, or was it just mostly looking for treasure?
No, they've never like specifically looked for the Ark in and of itself. They're just hunting the treasure, as a whole. I love that show. The only reason why I stopped watching that show is because I just kind of forgot it was on, and there's like 40 goddamn episodes in one season, and they're all an hour long, and I just don't have the time to get through
A
them.
lot of time, yeah.
And,
yeah.
so, and it's a show that I love so much that like if I fall asleep or if I'm like watching it as I'm like trying to do something else, like I don't want to do that. Like I'm invested in the
back and do
show.
it.
So one of
Yeah,
these days
yeah.
I'm gonna go back and plow through all of them. But to long answer to your very short question, they're not necessarily looking for the Ark, although it was speculated that it could potentially have been buried there, that could be the treasure that was in the
Right.
original money pit. Who knows?
I watched, I don't think it was that show, but I watched another show maybe that was about Oak Island, because I remember being significantly fewer episodes than that, which was sustainable. And they were looking for Templar artifacts and Templar treasure. And I know that, I mean, over history, that stuff has been found that would indicate that somebody was there. What that is, I don't really know specifically. I'm not really sure.
No, listen, they have absolutely found some Templar artifacts on Oak Island. One of the most significant artifacts that they found is a lead cross that is believed to be a Templar cross. They had it carbon dated. The dates match up. I couldn't tell you exactly what the dates were when I went back to, but the dates line up and it actually matches. It's a very, very distinct cross, and it matches with carvings that might actually, I'm not sure if it's Roslyn Chapel or if it's someplace else I believe it might be someplace else in France that we know was a Templar stronghold and that there were carvings, and the crosses absolutely match 100%. So,
Interesting.
Other than just finding some artifacts, there's really no solid proof that the Templars were on Oak Island. But it is an absolutely fascinating theory.
Another example of like the interconnectedness of the whole world at times before there was supposed to be any interconnectedness around the whole world.
100%, 100%. And I don't want to. I could talk all day about Oak Island, but one look. Is the treasure still there? I have no idea. Was it the Ark? I don't know. Do I think something was there at one point? Yeah, probably. But what's fascinating about Oak Island, to your point, about things being so interconnected, that island was used for some shit, baby. I mean, there are remnants of so many different cultures and so many different time periods that are left over on that island that they have found, unless producers are buying shit and putting it there. That would break my heart. I hope that's not the case.
I don't
but
think that's not necessarily out of the question either when you're talking about a TV show.
Well, I like to play pretend, and playing pretend that they actually found those things. There's no way that the history of that island has been rewritten. So anyway.
We got another comment here on YouTube, and I'm not really sure what it's supposed to mean here. I'm going to show it up on the screen here, but DJ Rusty Justy on YouTube writes, October 13th, 1307, waiting for the 33rd degree of Freemasonry being tied to running all major corporations such as McDonald's, Bank of America, etc., Freemasonry. So that's as good a time as any to kind of bring up the Freemasons. DJ Rusty Justy, actually, by the way, also of J&J Cleaning in New Jersey, if you guys are interested here. I heard they're going to also maybe strike up a
sponsor the show, I heard.
Here.
Yeah.
There we go. We'll send you a bill. So that's a good tie into the Freemasonry, and I think kind of where we'll land this here. You talked about it a couple times before, kind of hinting at the Freemasons, and I think there's a lot of speculation that the Freemasons are derivative of the Knights Templar and potentially the modern incarnation of the Knights Templar. It emerges publicly in the 1600s, which, if you think back to now, the escape to Scotland, when does that happen? 1300s, mid 1400s, you're in Roslyn Chapel, and now by the 1600s, the Freemasons have kind of emerged. And if you look at the sort of trajectory of how the Templar even got here in the first place, what was it? It was a breakaway of a breakaway. And then like all along the path, like they picked up other breakaway sects from the Catholic Church or from Jerusalem, even from its initial origins. So to have the idea that another group would break away from the core group is certainly not out of the question, given the lineage of its entire life cycle.
Well, yeah, dude, it goes deeper. It goes into the Rosicrucians, which is a whole nother sect, kind of part and parcel with the Freemasons. I mean, there are just spider webs all over the place of secret societies that kind of all start with the Knights Templar, and we could probably spend a week of episodes talking just about that, and we probably will at some point because I love that stuff.
So then I'm going to pose the question to you here. Do you think the arc passes from the Templars to the Masons? And if so, do you think that somebody within the Freemasons today knows of the location of the arc?
I think if they manage to get it to Scotland, yes. If they manage to get the arc to Scotland, yes, I do believe so. If they never got it there, no, I don't think so. And we'll talk about that on the next episode.
Ooh, baby, that's a good cue up. I mean, you kind of stole the thunder of my next question is do you think it landed in Scotland? Do you think Scotland is the resting place? But I think your answer is clear now. The answer is no.
Probably not. It's a fun story. It's a fun story, but probably not.
Okay. But you think that the Knights Templar took it from Temple Mount to France,
Yes,
to Scotland. You buy into that.
correct.
You just don't think it landed there. You think there's one more stop on the journey.
I think I think that it was in Scotland at some point, but I think that it was recovered by someone else a little bit more south, and that's where it lies today.
All right. We're talking Vatican City, baby.
Yeah.
We're talking Vatican City. And that's as good a time as any to remind you to like and subscribe. Click the little thumbs up on YouTube. Ring that bell for us. Ding, 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 ding. So that you're getting notified when we're posting new episodes every single Thursday. Like you said at the top here, this is episode 3. We're going to parlay right into episode 4. For those watching us on the live stream, we're going to shut it down and open it back up. So that makes it a little easier for us to edit it and actually post this up when it goes live officially. For everyone else that's tuning in after the live stream, conspiracyrealist.com. You could find each and every one of our links to all of our social media channels. We're everywhere. Hop on there. Give us a follow. We're growing faster than ever. So keep helping us out there. We really do appreciate that. Leave comments, especially if you're on Spotify. We're seeing those comments there. We're seeing them coming into YouTube here. But for this week and for this episode, for you all watching this on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are sold, cheers, and we will see you in Vatican City, baby.